Saifi this side. So one of you guys commented on one of my videos to make a comparison video between the Intel and the AMD processors, and right away I realized that this is some information that should be out there so that you guys can make better decisions while purchasing a laptop or a desktop, or even if you are making a custom PC. So there are majorly these two companies, Intel and AMD, who are making processors for all your laptops and desktops. So today in this video we'll be comparing the offerings from these companies and we'll be putting everything under three major headings: range of options, performance and cost. But first let me tell you guys a little story. Both Intel and AMD were started around the same time, the former in 1968 and the latter in 1969. But fast forward to 21st century, Intel is the single largest player when it comes to processors of x86 architecture, on which most of the consumer and the professional PCs are based on. And at one point of time, Intel even held 80% of the market share for these processors. And there's a very simple reason for that. AMD just did not have good products to compete against Intel. AMD used to work on strategy of competing on raw price to performance. They did not have the technology to compete against Intel, and hence they were forced to sell cheaper products with lower margins. And this gave the edge to Intel, or you can say the monopoly to Intel, to price their products whatever the hell they want to. But there's one downside to any monopoly. If any other player comes with a great product, he is going to eat your share, and same is happening with Intel now. Couple of years ago, AMD launched Zen architecture processors, and since then things are shaking at the top. If you look at the recent market share comparison between these top dogs, market share of Intel is on a downward trend, while for AMD it's increasing year by year. But why now? And again the answer is very simple. AMD have finally came out with good products, but along with good products they have very competitive pricing, thanks to working with lower margins that they were forced to develop such technologies that gives them this edge to take an aggressive pricing stance. But now more than ever, things are looking even starker for Intel. AMD Ryzen's 3rd generation processor, which were launched last year, are based on 7nm architecture, while Intel recently launched its 10th generation processors, which are still based on 14nm architecture. Okay, wait, let me first tell you what this nanometer is. So whenever you find someone talking some numbers of nanometer, they are basically referring to the size of transistor on the CPU die. So smaller the size, more number of transistors can be fit into a given area, which increases the performance as well as the power efficiency. Intel has been struggling on shifting to 10nm processors for a long time now, and I think one of the main reasons for this impasse is that Intel itself holds the manufacturing process of its processors, while AMD on the other hand contracts the manufacturing process to companies who have been connoisseurs in manufacturing. Hence, they were able to switch to 7nm without any issues. So with this, AMD has finally excellent products on their shelves now. Okay, so I hope you like this story. Now let's move on to the comparisons. And first of all, we'll discuss about the range of products. So we'll be comparing Intel's 9th generation processor with AMD's 3000 series of processor, because I think it would be unfair to compare Intel's this year 10th generation processor with year-old processors from AMD. And of course, Intel's 10th generation processors are not even out in the market right now in India. So I have compiled a list of processors from both Team Red and Team Blue, and you can see that both these companies provide you with great number of options. AMD's lineup start from Ryzen 3 1200, which is a quad-core CPU, 4 threads, base clock at 3.6 GHz, max boost up to 4.2 GHz, and TDP of 65 watt. And the highest in their line is Ryzen 9 3950X, which is a mind-boggling 16-core CPU, 32 threads, base clock at 3.5 GHz, max boost at 4.7 GHz, and a TDP of 105 watt. And for the Team Blue, range starts from Intel Core i3 9100T, which is a quad-core CPU, 4 threads, base clock at 3.1 GHz, max boost at 3.7 GHz, TDP of 35 watt. And their highest offering is Intel Core i9 9900K, which is an octa-core CPU, that means 8 cores, 16 threads, base clock at 3.6 GHz, max boost up to 5.0 GHz, and TDP of 95 watt. And maybe you have figured this out by now. Ryzen 3 processors compete against Intel Core i3 processors, Ryzen 5 processors against Intel Core i5 processors, and so on. So both the companies have ample amount of options for you to choose from. So now let's talk about the performance. If you look at the number of cores and threads, AMD just completely dominates Intel. Especially when you look at their top of the line processors, Ryzen 9 3950X has 16 cores, 32 threads, while Intel Core i9 9900K has merely 8 cores and 16 threads. That's half the number of cores and threads, and Ryzen 7 3800X has 8 cores and 16 threads in comparison to Intel Core i7 9700K, which has only 8 cores and 8 threads. And we see a similar story for Ryzen 5 and Intel Core i5. But you can also notice that Intel beats AMD in the clock speed and the max boost. But one thing you should note that Intel processors can run at their maximum frequency for only a minute or two. But there's no such time limit to AMD processors when they are running at their maximum frequency. And this is one of the reasons that they are able to reduce the performance gap between them and Intel. But enough of the numbers, let's talk about how they perform in the real world. So if you're a gamer and the only thing you care about is the FPS or the frames per second, you should go for Intel. But if you're someone whose workflow is more involved with productivity, like software rendering, video editing, where you can actually make real use of those extra cores or those extra threads, or if you're someone who can give up little bit of performance for saving some extra cash, then go with AMD. And you will also see this trend when you compare the benchmark scores, with Intel scoring more on single core performance and AMD scoring more on multi-core performance. Now let's come to our last heading for the comparisons: cost. AMD is the clear winner here. here. All AMD processors are priced lower than their direct competitors from Intel, and by the way, this is the kind of comparison you can see for yourself by checking their price online. But there are two more aspects here. First, when you buy a processor, you also have to buy supporting motherboard, and comparatively, motherboards for AMD processors are priced lower than the Intel processors. So you also save some money here. And second, when you buy an AMD processor, they come with CPU coolers except for Ryzen 9 3950 processor, for which AMD recommends that you go for liquid cooling instead of air cooling. And these stock coolers are of pretty decent quality, and some even come with RGB as well. So this way also you can save some more money, and by the way, you can use this extra cash to get a better GPU. So this is the complete comparison of Intel and AMD processors, and the story I told you earlier is what is happening in the present. And you might also hear some arguments which I think that I should address beforehand. So first argument is TDP of Intel processors are lower, so they should perform better. See, Intel writes down the TDP for their processors when they are running at their base clock speed, because I told you the Intel processors can only run on max frequency for a minute or two only. While for AMD, the TDP figures they are writing is when their processors are running at max frequency, as they don't have any time limit for this. And this is the reason TDP of Intel processors is lower than the AMD processor. Second argument is when Intel will come out with 7nm or 10nm architecture, it will blow away AMD. Well, as much as I like the proposition of Intel coming out with 7nm or 10nm processors, I'm not sure about the blowing away part. See, AMD started way behind Intel, but as of today, they are almost at par with them in terms of performance, and they are eating into Intel's share year by year. So by the time Intel comes out with their 7nm and 10nm processor, AMD might have figured something out by then to give them a tough fight. Third and the last argument is, am I an AMD fan, or did AMD pay me to make this video? The answer to the argument is no. For this record, I have my custom PC running on Intel's 8th generation Core i7-8700K processor, which is a hexa-core processor with 12 threads, and it was Intel's flagship processor in 2017, and I bought it in early 2018, and it was expensive. So now let's talk about the verdict. So at this point of time, I think you are better off with an AMD processor. They perform almost at par in gaming with Intel's processor and surpass them when you do tasks that involves more cores and more threads. So if I had to build a custom PC today, I would go for either Ryzen 9 3900X or Ryzen 9 3950X, preferably Ryzen 9 3900X, so that I also get a CPU cooler with RGB and I can use that saved money to invest on a better GPU. So I think that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something of value today, and if you did, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more tech content. But until next time, thanks for watching, stay indoors, stay safe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.